Welcome to Things You Don't Know. This is another quick and quirky subject. Today, we're covering something so ordinary that most of us have probably snapped one, lost one, shot one across a room, or found one dried up in a desk drawer without ever asking where it came from. What are we talking about? Rubber bands, and more broadly, elastic.
That's right, Dr. Weaver. And rubber bands occupy a strange level of technology. Nobody's impressed when you hand them one, but remove every rubber band from every office, kitchen, warehouse, farm, post office, and factory, and people would immediately start asking who sabotaged civilization.
They sure would, Chandler, and the idea is beautifully simple. Take something stretchy, make it into a loop, and use its desired return to its original shape as a fastening device. But getting rubber to behave reliably enough to do that took much longer than you might expect. Long before Europeans were manufacturing rubber products, indigenous civilizations in Mesoamerica were already working with natural latex. Archaeological and chemical evidence shows that ancient people processed rubbers and made objects, including bouncing balls. They discovered useful ways of changing the properties of latex centuries before European industrial chemistry existed.
Natural rubber begins as latex, a milky fluid produced by certain plants, most famously the rubber tree. The useful part contains long molecular chains that can stretch and then recoil. That sounds ideal until you discover that raw rubber can become sticky in heat and stiff in cold.
So early rubber basically had a personality problem, you could say. On a nice day, terrific, everything goes smoothly. But you change the temperature, and suddenly the product starts renegotiating its job description.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, I guess. The rubber band wasn't actually the first attempt to put rubber's stretchiness to work. British inventor Thomas Hancock was experimenting with rubber by the early 19th century. By 1820, he patented uses involving things such as gloves, suspenders, shoes, and stockings.
That matters because elastic is the bigger story. A rubber band is one elastic product, but elasticity became enormously valuable in clothing. Once manufacturers could incorporate rubber strands into fabric, garments could stretch and recover instead of relying entirely on buttons, ties, buckles, or very rigid sizing.
Which eventually gave humanity elastic waistbands. Historians have debated the greatest technological breakthroughs of the Industrial Revolution, but anyone who has just finished Thanksgiving dinner already knows where elastic ranks.
Right at the top, if I have anything to say about it. The crucial advance was vulcanization. Charles Goodyear developed a process in the United States involving rubber, sulfur, and heat, while Thomas Hancock developed and patented a related process in Britain. Vulcanization creates cross links between the rubber's molecular chains, producing material that is far more stable, durable, and useful across changing temperatures.
In practical terms, rubber stopped acting like an unpredictable goo and became something manufacturers could depend upon. It could stretch repeatedly, return towards its original shape, and survive conditions that would have ruined untreated rubber.
And once you have dependable stretch, somebody eventually looks at it and says, hmm, can we make this into a little circle that holds my papers together? Yep, and that somebody was British businessman Stephen Perry. Working with manufacturer Thomas Barnabas Daft, their British patent was sealed on March 17th, 1845, and specifically covered improvements involving elastic bands made from vulcanized India rubber.
One method was remarkably close to what you might imagine today. Make a tube or cylinder of rubber and cut across it to create individual, endless rings. The patent suggested uses for belts, bandages, garters, waistbands, wristbands, and even securing coverings over jars.
Which means that the rubber band arrived almost fully aware of its future career. Give me something loose. I'll wrap around it.
Here is the basic science. Rubber is made of long polymer molecules. When the band is relaxed, those molecular chains are arranged in tangled, irregular configurations. Stretch the band, and many of those chains become more aligned.
Release the tension, and the molecules naturally tend toward their more disordered arrangement. The material contracts, and the band returns towards its original size. Vulcanization helps keep those molecular chains connected so the rubber can undergo the process over and over without simply pulling apart.
Up to a point, every rubber band eventually reaches the moment when molecular science becomes a small flying projectile. Now, at one point, everybody has opened an old drawer and found what appears to be the fossilized remains of a rubber band. It's hard, cracked, sticky, or it even breaks the moment you touch it. So, what happened to it, Dr. Weaver?
Well, rubber ages. Oxygen, ultraviolet light, ozone, heat, and chemical exposure gradually attack the material. Molecular bonds change or break, and the band loses the flexibility it once had. That is why rubber bands stored for years, especially in heat or sunlight, can become quite brittle.
Stretching them repeatedly also produces mechanical fatigue. So, keeping a rubber band permanently stretched around something and then expecting it to behave like new several years later is optimistic.
Which, Dr. Deneen, that finally explains the rubber band around that 20-year-old stack of tax papers. It didn't fail suddenly, it just retired quietly.
And taking it off hit me in the eye. The word elastic can be confusing because it describes a property as well as products. In clothing, an elastic material may combine rubber or synthetic elastomer threads with woven or knitted fibers. Modern synthetic elastomers can be engineered for particular conditions, including resistance to oils, weather, heat, or chemicals.
That is why elastic materials appear in far more places than desk drawers, waistbands, medical garments, sportswear, fitted sheets, luggage, industrial equipment, seals, shock absorbers, exercise equipment, and thousands of other products.
That's right, and although fitted sheets prove that elastic did not necessarily solve every problem involving a fitted sheet,
Well, that's true. That can be a real pain in the butt, man.
they sure can.
Yeah. Rubber bands became more than office supplies. In the United States, William Spencer began making bands in the 1920s and cutting them from discarded inner tubes. Yep. He found a major use for them in bundling newspapers, then expanded into agriculture and industrial applications.
Modern rubber bands are produced in enormous ranges of size, thickness, strength, and composition. Natural rubber remains especially useful because of its excellent elasticity, while synthetic elastomers are used when different chemical or physical properties are needed.
And somehow the same basic object can secure broccoli at a grocery store, organize electrical cables, bundle money, close a bag, operate a toy, or set in your junk drawer for 9 years waiting for a mission. Can do a lot of things. But now, a few quick facts before we leave the humble rubber loop here. Rubber bands are technically springs. They store potential energy when stretched. even though they don't look anything like the metal coil most of us picture when somebody says spring.
Foster rubber is also unusual because stretching it can actually cause it to warm slightly, while allowing stretched rubber to contract can change its temperature again. That behavior reflects changes occurring in the arrangement of its molecular chains.
And manufacturers learned long ago that something this simple still benefits from standardization. By the 1920s, the U.S. Bureau of Standards was publishing specifications concerning rubber band dimensions, strength, elongation, and quantity. Even the rubber band eventually acquired paperwork.
Which Dr. Weaver is quite appropriate. Its first major job was holding paperwork together, so it's kind of apropos, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
The future of elastic material may be considerably more interesting than the familiar tan rubber band. Researchers are working on elastomers designed to be recyclable, biodegradable, bio based, or capable of repairing themselves after damage. The difficulty is that durability and easy decomposition are almost kind of like opposite goals. We want elastic materials to survive thousands of stretches while we use them, but not survive for centuries after we throw them away.
Dr. Weaver, there's also growing interest in so called smart elastomers, materials that respond to heat, electricity, pressure, or other conditions. Elastic materials could increasingly become components in soft robotics, flexible electronics, wearable sensors, artificial muscles, medical devices, and other technologies where rigid machinery simply does not work very well.
So the future descendant of the ordinary rubber band may not be holding a bunch of envelopes together. It could be inside a robotic hand, monitoring movement in a medical device, or made from material designed to disappear safely when its useful life is over.
Which is a considerable career trajectory for something most of us currently keep in the same drawer as dead batteries, mystery keys, and three pins that don't work. I think I got about six.
Me too. And ladies and gentlemen, that's another quick and quirky look at something ordinary that turned out to have a surprisingly complicated history.
Yes, and for Dr. Weaver, Dr. Deneen, and myself, this has been Things You Don't Know, quick and quirky, and we'll see you next time with another everyday objective, probably used for years without ever wondering who had to invent it. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time, folks.